All right, good morning. These are my friends, Tyler and Camille Hildebrandt. And just excited to have them with us this morning as we wrap up our Hidden Figures series with our last kind of live story. And so tell us, as we've been seeing these stories, one of the questions we've been asked is, how did you two come to follow Jesus?
It's a really good question. I grew up in church. I grew up in this church. Around the, 17, 18, 19 era of my life, I started making really poor decisions and had a rough crowd of peer group that was encouraging those bad decisions, and I just got into a really bad rhythm of heavy drinking and partying and stuff like that. And after one specific night, I remember of excessive partying and stuff like that, I remember on my drive home, God just got to me in my car, and I remember he told me that he loved me. And he told me he loved me, but he said I could not affiliate with his church and keep making the decisions that I was making. And so I just remember telling God, okay, we're having this conversation in the first place, so you win. I'm yours. You told me that you loved me, and I'm yours. So you get to make the decisions from here on out.
Okay. Thanks, Ty. What about you, Camille?
Yeah, so for me, started in my early 20s. I was living a life very separate from God and what he wanted for my life at that time. It was at a quite desperate time in my life that I remember lying in bed one night, unable to sleep, and I just cried out to God. And I asked him to help me, to give me his strength, to get me out of this place that I found myself. And so he answered me. He gave me the strength that I needed to keep moving on. And it was at that time, shortly after, that I was invited to attend Alpha here at CrossRoads. And that was a safe place for me to go, and I met some awesome people, and I was just able to explore and discover what that commitment meant and what following Jesus really was all about.
So good. Last Sunday, if you weren't with us, we talked about how God has chosen us, each of us, for the exact places where we live and where we work, that he's put us there in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in retirement, wherever we're at, to be on mission for him. He's called us by name. And yet we also talk about this idea that God still calls people to not just stay locally and be on mission, but to go overseas to share the gospel and build God's kingdom. And these two have sensed a call to go work with the Shan people in northern Thailand. And so tell us, how did that come about?
Yeah, absolutely. When we first got married, almost next week, it'll be 6 years to the day, we started talking about mission. Mission was the topic in our home, and we talked about, what does that look like? Does that look like locally, or does that look cross-culturally? Does that look like church, or does that look like parachurch? And so we were just digesting this stuff with each other and with God. And in 2018, we got the opportunity to go to Thailand on what we called our short-term vision trip. And we just went there with a single expectation that God would do a work in our hearts, that he would impact our hearts to go or to stay, but to do mission somewhere, whether that be in our hometown or somewhere else. And he did. He showed up. He showed up when we went. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember a specific opportunity that we had to go to a Shan village where many of the people there were unreached and very few believers. I remember on the way home, Tyler and I, with tears in our eyes, looked at each other and we said, how can we leave? How can we leave after we've seen all the need that is around us there?
Mm-hmm. And being impacted by that need, when we got home, we were just really overcome with a heavy burden. So we told each other, I remember we sat down and we said, we need to give ourselves 6 months before we even make any decision about what's happening in our lives right now or what God's calling us to. And after that 6 months, it changed from how can we leave to how can we not go back. And we're going back.
That's so wonderful. So the plan in the next year or so is to send these two from our church to go to Thailand and to work and live amongst the Shan people. And if you would like to hear more of Tyler and Camille's story, because you just got a little snippet, Tyler will be here after service in the foyer. You can ask him some of that story. Or if you're interested about them going on mission to Thailand, they have some prayer cards at the missions kiosk that you can pick up.